In this video, I'm going to dispel 7 myths and help you get better photos. Come on, Peps. Morning guys, it's fantastic to see you all again. So, there's so many things that I hear or read and see in forums from time to time that are just things that people tell people to do with their camera or with composition, but generally in photography, which I just think that's just not true. And these myths just seem to keep getting repeated again and again. So I wanted to try and dispel some of them. And one of the reasons was that I got this camera, you can see here with the yellow sticker, it's on loan to me from Canon. So I'm doing some work for a DP review. I'm actually going to be going out with this EOS 250D. I've never shot with a Canon before, so this is going to be interesting, which is a beginner's camera. It's one of the cheaper DSLRs on the market. It's reasonably new out, and I just want to go and shoot with it and just show that you don't need an amazing camera to produce amazing shots. So I've got this kit lens on it and I'm going to be doing that. So check that video out in a few weeks. It'll be on DP Reviews channel. But this got me thinking that I should do something to dispel some of the myths that are sort of floating out there. So without any further ado, I'm going to jump straight into them. And the first one is that you need to shoot on a tripod in landscape photography. And that's just not true. I mean, there are 2 reasons why I think you need to use a tripod in landscape photography. And the first one is that if your shutter speed's too slow. So depending on your camera, depending on whether you've got inbuilt stabilization, you know, if you're less than maybe an 1/8 of a second, a 1/10 of a second, maybe a 1/30th of a second, if you've not got any stabilization, then yes, putting it on a tripod is going to make a difference. Or if you're just not too confident about holding your camera steady. But that's one reason why you might want to put your camera on a tripod. The other reason is that you might be taking 2 shots and you don't want your camera to move, and that's if you're sort of blending exposures. I do that quite a lot myself, but not all the time. And you know, if you're doing that, if you're taking 2 shots and you want to blend those exposures later because there's a lot of dynamic range in the shot, or you're doing focus stacking or something like that, then that's another reason that you probably want to put your camera on a tripod. But apart from those, there is no other reason that you should put your camera on a tripod. And actually, I think just hand holding your camera, you know, just that movement, the ability to just move it around in sort of 3D space is so liberating. It means that you've got more ability to take a great shot and find a good composition. And in fact, one of the things that I say when I'm on my workshops is, to everybody, is don't get your tripod out. Your tripod should be the last thing you get out, and only get it out if you need it. You know, what you should be doing is, you know, like I said in my video a few weeks ago, using your phone to try and find a composition, then maybe hand holding your camera, and then if you need to put it on a tripod, put it on a tripod. But I don't think I don't agree with this slowing down by putting it on a tripod. I don't think that's necessarily the case. There's no reason you can't slow down just by putting your camera down and just taking in the environment. As soon as you put your camera on a tripod, you're focused on small movements, and if anything, it compromises the composition that you're going to get. Okay, the second point is that you have to shoot on manual. I mean, that is just ridiculous. You know, you get a camera, you spend all this money on a camera that can do all these amazing things, and then you put it onto manual. Now, I understand why some people say that I think you should understand, you know, the basics of exposure like aperture and ISO and shutter speed, but you shouldn't put it on manual. I just don't agree with that. I think, you know, you should use the functions within your camera to the best ability. And, you know, if your camera can expose the scene correctly, then let it do that. You know, what's the point of putting it on manual and then having to control the shutter speed until you see a little dial go into the middle, which is effectively using the automated features of your camera. What you should be doing for exposure is looking at the histogram. The histogram is what's important. And what I like to do is put it on aperture priority, which works incredibly well for landscape photographers because usually you want to control the depth of field of your shot. So by putting it on aperture priority, you can say, okay, this is going to be f8 or f10, and then the camera will expose that scene. Now, if the exposure is not right, then you're going to bracket that exposure, or you're going to dial in some exposure compensation. Most of the time, I just bracket the shot. Putting it on manual just gives you something else to have to think about. You should be thinking about composing the shot, trying to get the best shot out of the scene in front of you, and you really don't want to worry about your camera too much. Now, don't get me wrong, I think you should understand how to put it on manual. You should understand all the functions on your camera, and there are times when you should put it on manual, like if you're taking long exposures, or you've got to control, you don't want the aperture or the shutter speed to change. I put it on manual for doing video, and I think if we're talking about video, then it's different. But for photography, I really don't see the point of putting it on manual. I think it's something that's talks about all the time. I think it's a lot of professional photographers say it because they, I don't know whether this high and mighty view of, oh, if you're shooting on manual, you know what you're talking about, but it's rubbish, absolute rubbish. Okay, the third one is around focus. Now, I think focus is a tricky thing. There's no doubt about it. I did a video on focus that you can check out here, and how I like to focus. But I think there's different ways of focusing. I think it's sometimes difficult with different scenes to know what you want to get in focus, because sometimes you can't get everything in focus. But one of the things I hear all the time is that you need to focus on the thing that you want to be sharp, and I think that's totally wrong, because and this is the thing that a lot of people probably don't understand, is that if you have two objects, so if we have these two objects here, and this is the one that's close to you, and this is the one that's far away, then if you focused on this one that's close to you, then there's a good chance, say f10, that this one far away won't be in focus. But if you focus on the one that's far away, then there's a chance that this one might be acceptably in focus. Now, you don't want the mountains that are far away. This is the mountains, by the way. You don't want the mountains that are far away to be out of focus, but you can probably cope with a slight loss of focus right at the bottom of your frame. So what I tend to do is focus on the things that are far away, and then hopefully the things closer to me will come into focus. But the thing I always do is I check this with an app called PhotoPills. There's loads of other apps out there. I'll put a link in the description to PhotoPills. I'm not affiliated with them or anything, I just think it's a great app. And I go into that and I dial in where I'm going to focus, and I try and work out what's going to be in focus. And by doing that lots and lots of times, I've learned a lot more about focus and how to use it. But I like to say, check out this video on focus, and I'm sure that'll help you. Okay, the fourth one is about editing. So I've seen a lot recently about people saying that you need to understand Photoshop, and Photoshop's really important because editing's really important to get amazing photos. Whilst I agree with part of that, editing is really important. I do think that part of the artistic process of being a photographer is probably editing your photos. As much as I don't like doing that, because I don't like sitting at my computer, I'd much rather be out. It is important. If you go all the way back to Ansel Adams, then he said the same thing, that editing was really important. So yes, you do need to edit your photos, but no, you don't need to know anything about Photoshop. There are lots of applications out there that are much simpler than Photoshop that allow you to do amazing things. And actually, I only use Lightroom to edit the majority, 95% of my photos, and it is amazing. You can do amazing things with it. And contrary to popular belief, you can do local editing within Lightroom as well. And now I've got this new tablet, thanks Thomas, then it allows you to edit things really, really carefully, so you can apply pressure and do lots of dodging and burning to your photo within Lightroom. You can undo that, you can change it. Now, okay, Photoshop might give you a little bit more flexibility with layers and things, but if you don't want to use Photoshop, you don't need to. You're still going to be able to produce amazing photos. The only thing I do use Photoshop for is when I'm focus stacking and when I'm trying to remove something that's very complicated from the photo, and that I use content aware fill. But to be honest, if I couldn't do either of those two things, it wouldn't bother me. Okay, the fifth one is going back to cameras, and I've talked about this a lot, and loads of people have talked about it, but there's still a thing that, you haven't got full frame, so you're not a professional, and you need full frame to get amazing shots. And although full frame has some advantages. Certainly low noise, tends to be higher megapixels, not that that matters in most cases, but you can probably print a little bit bigger if you're inspecting the print really close up. It has things that aren't as good as well. So with a full frame camera, if you compare it to a crop sensor camera, then for the same field of view, then you're going to get less in focus in your full frame than you are in your crop sensor. So actually, if you think about it, for landscape photography, if you're shooting at f8, which is maybe the optimum for a particular lens, then you're going to get more in focus on your crop sensor for the same field of view than you are on your full frame camera. So you could argue that crop sensor was better than full frame, but the reality is that it actually doesn't matter. You've got to get what's right for you. And if you're not printing huge and inspecting them really close up, then you don't need full frame. You can get away with APS-C or micro four thirds, and it just depends on what you want to do with it. So don't worry about what camera you've got. I get asked all the time, should I get a full frame camera? Should I upgrade to a full frame camera? In some cases, you might actually be downgrading by thinking you're upgrading. So just don't worry about it. Okay, the sixth thing is looking at composition. And the thing that sums this up is the saying that never put the horizon in the center of your photo. Other things that people say are you should have odd numbers of things, or you should put something in the intersection of the thirds. Now, whilst some of these things probably have an element of truth, they're not rules that you should follow. There are loads of photos that I've taken that break all these rules but still look great. So, for instance, this one, the horizon's in the center. This one, the church, is definitely not in the intersection of the thirds. It's right on the side of the image here. I've cropped off the mountain. I've broken lots of rules with this particular shot. This one, the horizon's in the center. This one, the horizon's in the center. You get the idea. You can break rules, and what you should do is look at the image and look at whether it's balanced. Is it pleasing? Does it look beautiful? Is it telling a story? And when you start to get away from following those rules and do something a little bit different, then that's when you start to get photos that are really amazing. So just try and break those rules. Okay, the seventh one, and I know a lot of people talk about this, and that is that you need good light for good photography. And you need light for photography, but you don't need good light. Now, good light is how you use the light to produce a good looking photo. So you need light to produce a good photo. You don't need good light to produce a good photo. So, can you hear that cow? I think the cow's having a baby. Okay, we'll carry on. Hopefully you won't pick it up. So, let me just show you an image here. So this is a shot that I took in Anglesey. It's a shot for the seascape video on my masterclass. And this was a day that I was walking around the beach here, and it was still and flat. The light was flat. The clouds were fairly boring. There was no detail in them. Yeah, I managed to get lots of really great shots. And actually, when you have flat light, you're removing something that's actually sometimes very problematic, which is shadows in photography. So you can use it really well. If you've got, if it's snowing, then you can get shots like this. This was really flat light, but it was snowing. And most people would probably go out after the snow had finished, but by going out when it was snowing, I captured something a little bit different. This shot from my drone, again, the light was just dull and boring, but I managed to get something that sort of looked quite painterly. So, whatever the weather is, whatever the light is, just go out and embrace it. That's what I'd say. It doesn't matter whether you're shooting at sunrise, sunset, middle of the day. Just embrace it. If you are shooting it with really harsh light, then try and use those shadows to your advantage. If you're shooting and it's flat, boring, dull light, then concentrate on shapes and patterns within the landscape and try and create something that's a little bit simpler. But there's nothing you don't need good light, you just need to use light effectively. Okay, that was 7. I could have done 70. Things like never shoot into the sun, always use the lowest ISO setting. There's just so many things and myths out there. And what I do is, if you're not sure about something, then don't just blindly follow it. Go and maybe research it and look and see if that's what other people are using as well. Okay, before I go, I have got a giveaway, which I was going to do last week, but I didn't get around to doing it. So I've got Right, just let me get this out. I've got another tripod to give away. So this is a Benro, let me see, it's a TMA 28C tripod. So I'm giving away this tripod to anybody, and there's no reason I'm doing it. I'm just decided it'd be good to do a giveaway. I've not done one for a while, and I wanted to thank you guys. Now I can only thank one of you. I haven't got 100 tripods or 1,000 tripods, but I still am blown away by this channel. I cannot believe that I have 130,000 subscribers, and I get all these people watching my channel every week. I just did an interview for Outdoor Photography magazine, which should be coming out in a few weeks, and it just was a bit surreal, really, because it was something that I've always read, and being in a magazine makes it seem a bit more real, I suppose. But yeah, the whole thing's surreal. So I wanted to just say thanks. I am giving away that tripod, and so what do you need to do? That's what you want to know, isn't it? So I thought what we could do is we could try and dispel some more myths in the comments below. So maybe you've got a myth that you're not sure about, and you can just say, is this true or not, and just put that in the comment. I'll try and get through them all and answer them all. Or maybe you've got something that is a myth that people say all the time, and dispel it in the comments below. So post that below, and I'll go through, and in a couple of weeks I'll choose a winner, and at random, obviously. In fact, my daughter usually does that, so I'll get my daughter to choose one at random, and I'll send that tripod out to whoever. I'll get in contact with you there. Actually, the other thing you probably should do is leave your Instagram handle, because that'll be easier for me to get in contact with you. And just make sure you follow me on Instagram so that I can message you really easily. So follow me on Instagram, leave your Instagram and post a comment, and you've got a chance of winning the tripod below. Well, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm off to Budapest now. Hopefully, I'm off to Budapest now on a photography free trip. No, I'm sure I'll do some photography, actually. In fact, I might take this and just, I'm going to take this. I'm going to take this camera to Budapest and do some photography. But I'm going there with my wife for just a bit of a relax and a few days off. And then I'm in the Faroes and Lofoten, so probably having no sleep and shooting the midnight sun. Thanks ever so much for watching. I'm waffling now, and until next Sunday, bye.